of votes per region, isn't it? Because you yourselves don't have the luxury of time. But without much ado, I think what we're here to share with you is basically the presidential popularity, Nyongesa, welcome, presidential popularity question, because that is the only question we covered. For once, we did not bother with key issues, because they have not changed since we started doing this at the beginning of the year. It is high cost of living, it is infrastructure, it is access to clean water, it is, good education, etc., etc. So we didn't do that. But if you want it, then we can still share it with you from the last 3 weeks, the poll that we did last 3 weeks ago. We've seen that nothing, generally changes. Okay. John, I don't know how to flip your. I'm using his computer. Okay, but I am required by law and by our protocols to basically share with you the methodology. And our methodology has not changed. It was done 6,000 sample, covering all the 9 regions that we now cover, sub-regions as we call them, and all the 47 counties. It also covered all the 290 constituencies within those counties. So we wanted it to give all the broad, political, groups or definitions that we have, or regions, an equal opportunity of being covered in the survey. So we didn't discriminate on any county, we didn't discriminate on any constituency, all were covered. The random sampling was then done therein within the wards themselves, because in some cases the samples were rather small. But in essence, who is covered in this survey is adult voters, the registered voters, right now 22 odd million registered voters. And in essence, the only way we could pull this off is by doing computer-assisted telephone interviews, right? So some of you have seen our call center. So the kids in the call center have been working round the clock, just, talking to people and finding out what their intentions are. And as you know, the law requires that we release the last polls 5 days to an election. So the last day to actually publish a poll, because the law is publication of electoral opinion polls, is actually tomorrow, okay? So we can still talk to you and release something if we want to do tomorrow, but publication of that particular poll can only be done as a deadline for tomorrow. After that, the law, stifles everyone from releasing any electoral, poll or related poll. Okay, as you can see, the margin of error for the 6,000 is plus or minus 1.4 at 95% degree of confidence. That generally means that 95 out of 100 times, if we were to ask the same question we asked this morning and yesterday, we would get the same answer. 5% of the time, things may be different. For social surveys, that gives us a lot of comfort, especially because of the way we have stratified our sample to ensure that it is as representative as possible of the entire population, which in this case is the voter population. Okay? It's still 1 week, so we need to do this disclaimer, which we do with you all the time, that until it is almost the last hour, you know that 48 hours, 24 hours in Kenyan politics or politics anywhere is a long time, okay? So there is that, possibility that things could change before Tuesday. So we need to make that disclaimer. This is not actually a predictive poll. It is the final poll that we are allowed to do. We will do our predictive poll on the day before. So on the 8th is when any reasonable scientist will then do their poll, but it is not a poll that you can actually, publish, but you can use it to do your predictions, okay? So if you're a good friend, we may whisper to you, okay? So if we look at the presidential popularity, and that is the only question we asked, assuming the general elections were held today, who would you vote for as president, then we see that if elections were held today, Raila would garner 49% of the vote, William Ruto would garner 42%, George Wajackoyah would garner 2%, David Wahiga would have 0.3%, and the undecided currently is at 6%. Okay, so there's 6% of Kenyans who are not yet decided, and we'll see how that pans out. If you allow me, because I know in interest of time people need to run off, let me start off by just, very quickly looking at the panoramic view by these 9 regions, and then focusing on each region individually, where we'll be able to see the counties, okay? So if you look at Raila, then you see that he has majority of the votes in Coast at 58%. At the Coast, William Ruto has 29%, and Wajackoyah currently has 4%. Undecided is still at 8%, which could tilt either way. But as we know, the Coast has hitherto been a stronghold for the former Prime Minister. But, we will wait and see how things go in this last couple of days when they're doing their, final rallies and wooing of voters. In northern Kenya, we also see that he has 55%, that is Raila. Ruto has 35%, and then there's 9% undecided. Wajackoyah has 1%. If we look at Lower Eastern, then we see that in Lower Eastern, he has majority. Certainly, we cannot fault Kalonzo, Charity, and the team down there for delivering Lower Eastern. You can see that 71% of the vote in Lower Eastern, as we speak, would be going to Raila Odinga. And then 19% would today go to Ruto, and 8% are currently undecided. In Mount Kenya, where a lot of activity has taken place as late as yesterday and today, both candidates have been trying to woo that vote-rich region. We see that Raila only has about a quarter of the votes at 24%. This is an indisputable Ruto stronghold with 66% of the vote currently. The undecided now in the Mount Kenya region is also only at 8%. So it's not as high as it's hitherto been. And I guess, that 8%, because it's so vote-rich a region, will also, is likely to tilt the votes to one person's favor over the other. Let's look at South Rift. South Rift has traditionally been one of those places where Raila Odinga has had a hold. That is, if you look at Narok, Kajiado, and Samburu. And what we now see is that South Rift is more inclined to William Ruto with 62%. So it is a William Ruto stronghold as we speak. And Raila only has 31% in South Rift. The undecided there is quite low at 2%. And we see that David Wahiga has 1% and George Wajackoyah has 4%. If we look at North Rift, that is another, undisputed William Ruto stronghold. 64% of the vote is for William Ruto. Raila garners 30% in the North Rift, and then we have undecided at 4%, and you can see the lower numbers for Wajackoyah and David Wahiga. Nyanza, definitely a Raila stronghold. We see him with 79%, 14% going to William Ruto, 3% is allocated to George Wajackoyah, and then we have 4% only who are undecided as we speak, 6 days to the elections. Western has also been a Raila stronghold. It was, iffy most of the times when we shared the polls with you, but we can now see that it's standing at 61%. 8% is undecided, and about 30%, 29%, say that they will vote for William Ruto. And then this capital city and county, Nairobi, has, for the last couple of months, oscillated towards Raila Odinga. So we see that he's still maintaining that, strength and strong as a stronghold with 53% of the vote and 37% of the vote currently going to William Ruto. The undecided is currently at 6%. Okay, and that is how then we get the 49 for Raila, 42 for William Ruto, and then 2% for George Wajackoyah. But significantly also for us to look at there is the undecided, which could either mean that Raila has a very decisive win if all the undecided or most of the undecided decide to vote for him, or it would actually also mean that if Ruto was to take all the undecided, then it would be a dead heat at 48-49, okay? Because there's 6% undecided. Realistically, I don't think all the undecided will go to one basket. We will have them splitting, and that is really what they're trying to do now. Secure the votes that they already have, but also woo that last-minute person who hasn't actually made up their mind on who exactly or feels they need a bit more nudging to make a decision. Let's look at coast very quickly, because I know you need to run. Look at Mombasa. 55% of the vote in Mombasa is going to go to Raila currently, 31% to William Ruto. I think in the last election, if I'm not wrong, it was more around the 68% range for, Raila in Mombasa. So something seems to have been lost. And let's wait and see how things go. They have their final rally there, I don't know, next couple of days. I think Ruto has already gone there as his last, route for this particular election. So let's see whether that would change some of the numbers a little bit and oscillate towards one side or the other. Kwale had been seen at somewhat, it started off as a battleground. It was oscillating more towards UDA, especially because one of the major kingpins there, the current governor, Salim Vuria, is a UDA luminary. But what we're seeing right now is a third of the vote is with UDA, which is significant, but majority of that vote is still with ODM at 55%. If we look at Kilifi, that is definitely Raila Odinga territory at 69%. Ruto only has 19%, so the luminaries there perhaps need to have done a bit more. We have called Tana River as a battleground county. It remains so if you see here, 44 for Raila, 43 for William Ruto, and therefore anybody who can get the 10% that is undecided can then take the day in this not very vote-rich county, but significant enough to tilt coast. And then if we look at Lamu, then we also see again battleground, yeah? It has been a Jubilee stronghold. But we now see that, Raila has 45% of the vote there. William Ruto is very close with 42%, and we see an undecided of 9%. And then Taita Taveta is indisputed as a Raila stronghold at 58%. We have William Ruto at 32%, and then we have the undecided at 6%. So that's generally how the coast pans out. And so, in a nutshell, as you had seen before, the coast oscillates more to, and pans out as a Raila Odinga stronghold. Quickly, if we look at northern Kenya, then these are the counties we have in northern Kenya. We have Garissa, we have Wajir, we have Mandera, Marsabit, Turkana, and Isiolo. And what you see here is that Garissa is certainly a Raila Odinga stronghold with almost 70% of the vote, 21% going to William Ruto. If we look at Wajir, half of the vote at 50% is with Raila, 45% is with Ruto, and then we have 6% who are currently undecided. If we look at Mandera, again, majority at 51% are supporting Raila, and 38% are with Ruto. If we look at Marsabit, the last time we did the poll and shared it with you, Marsabit was oscillating towards UDA, and now we see that it's gone back, and we have 50% for Raila Odinga and 41% for William Ruto. Indeed, we will give you some the back data so you can look at the trends. And then we see Turkana as well. That has remained quite constant, Raila Odinga stronghold with 57%, and then you see William Ruto with 29% in Turkana. In Isiolo, it still remains as we saw in our last poll, which we released about 3 weeks ago, where Isiolo now is more a William Ruto stronghold at 50%, and Raila has 42%, undecided is 8%. Okay? But in a nutshell, we saw that northern Kenya was oscillating again towards Raila Odinga. Lower eastern, we had said 71% in total is for Raila Odinga. How does it pan out by county? We see that Kitui, 68% of those in Kitui say they will vote for Raila. 22% will vote for Ruto. In Machakos, 72% will vote for Raila, 16% will vote for Ruto. And then in Makueni, 74% will vote for Raila and 21% will vote for Ruto. And we see that the undecided in those counties is at an average of 7%. The mountain. Everybody's been going there. It is vote rich, so it is, not shocking that there's a lot of attention in the mountain. And if we look at the counties in the mountain, then let us start off by agreeing that this is an undisputed Ruto stronghold. Whether you look at Meru, where he has 61%, or you look at Tharaka Nithi, where he has his highest percentage, which is 81%. But what is it vis-a-vis Raila? So we see that Raila seems to get his highest support in the mountain if you look at individual counties in Meru, where he has 32% of the vote, while Ruto has 61%. We see that Raila only has 13% in Tharaka Nithi, and Ruto has, an overwhelming majority, which is 81%. Same thing with Embu. Ruto has 76% of the vote and of voters supporting him, and 20% go to Raila Odinga. Nyandarua, more or less the same thing. The only difference with Nyandarua is Ruto has 64% popularity. Raila only has 19%, and then there is a large undecided, as you can see there, of 18%. So there's 18% in Nyandarua who are not sure yet. Let's look at Nyeri. 67% will vote for Ruto if elections were held today. And we see that 23% will vote for Raila, 7% are currently undecided. Kirinyaga, 73%, where the Raila's running mate comes from, 73% will actually vote for Ruto, and only 22% will vote for Raila. 3% are undecided. So it seems like this particular county is already made up its mind on how it's going to, go about its voting. If we look at Murang'a, then 66% are saying they'll vote for William Ruto, 20% say they will vote for Raila, and 12% in Murang'a are still, undecided. A very vote-rich county, might I add. And then we also see another vote-rich county, Kiambu, where 60% say they will vote for Ruto, 27% would vote for Raila, and then we see 9% are undecided. Laikipia, where I think at some point the head of the presidential campaign was coming from, David, is currently at 65% for Raila, and we have 27% who say they would vote for, is for Ruto, 27% would vote for Raila, and 7% are currently undecided. South Rift, Narok. Let me start off, there are not many counties. Narok, 50% would vote for Raila, 40% will vote for William Ruto as we speak, and 3% are undecided. Kajiado, which has been tilting either way, is currently more with William Ruto at 48%. 44% say they would vote for Raila, and 2% are undecided. The difference is such that one could even call that one of the battlegrounds right now. But if we look at Kericho and Bomet, those two counties have made up their minds. So you have Kericho County, majority at 79% would vote for William Ruto, and same thing with Bomet, where 82% would vote for William Ruto. Okay? What about North Rift? In the North Rift, we have West Pokot, we have Samburu. I had erroneously before said Samburu was in South Rift, but they are actually in North Rift. Then we have Uasin Gishu, Elgeyo Marakwet, Nandi, Baringo, and Nakuru. And what you see is interesting dynamics. Look at West Pokot. It has, and we have called it as a battleground. You see Raila with 44% currently, William Ruto with 52% is leading, and 3% are undecided, almost suggesting that decisions have been made in the minds of the voter. Let us look at Samburu. We have called this as a battleground from the get-go, and you can see it's 46 for Raila, 47 for Ruto, 5% undecided. What about Uasin Gishu? We see that 35% of this cosmopolitan county say they would vote for Raila. 60% of the, this county, which is the home of William Ruto, would vote for Ruto, and 3% are actually undecided. Elgeyo Marakwet is undisputed Ruto territory. Nandi at 78% is also Ruto's territory. Baringo, 77% is Ruto's territory. Nakuru, again, is interesting dynamics, but as we see it in this closing week, I'm not sure if and maybe the analysts will give their voice to this, but I'm not sure things will change much, and we can now call it as a Ruto, William Ruto stronghold with 57%, with only 4% who are undecided. Nyanza, this is Raila's stronghold. He leads in all the counties of Nyanza, 86 in Siaya, 10% going to Ruto. Kisumu, he has 87% support, 6% going to William Ruto. Homa Bay, he has 85% support, 5% going to William Ruto. Migori, which is cosmopolitan because you have both Luos and you have Kurias, has 20% going to William Ruto, and we have 79% support for Raila. And then Kisii, we have 66% support for Raila and 24% support for William Ruto. Not very different from Nyamira, the sister or neighboring county to Kisii, where you have 68% for Raila and 26% for William Ruto. The undecided, as you can see in this, melting pot of the former prime minister, is very low. So 3% undecided in Siaya, 2% undecided in Kisumu, but we see that Homa Bay has 7% undecided, Migori is only 1%, Kisii and Nyamira have 5% and 7% respectively. Another battleground region, because it has been oscillating, it is a place where both candidates have spent a lot of time, and that's Western region. And what we see in Western, here we have 5 counties, Trans Nzoia, Kakamega, Vihiga, Bungoma, and Busia. What is happening in Trans Nzoia? We now see that 52% of those in Trans Nzoia say they will vote for William Ruto. For Raila Odinga. The last time we did this survey, it was the flip. We had majority saying that they would vote for William Ruto. So that seems to have changed, perhaps with activities in the recent past. The undecided is still significant at 14%. And then we see Kakamega. This has been one of Raila's strongest holds in Western Kenya. And what we see is that he has 63% of this vote-rich county, 28% goes to William Ruto, and 5% is currently undecided. Vihiga is the home of Musalia Mudavadi, where 60% of the voters there say they will vote for Raila Odinga, only 27% say they will vote for William Ruto, and 12% are currently undecided. Bungoma has historically been a red herring. And so we see, and perhaps can still be called as a battleground, Raila is currently leading slightly with 46% in Bungoma, but we see that William Ruto got significant support at 43% in Bungoma, and the undecided is currently at 8%. Busia is another undisputed Raila stronghold with 88% for him and 7% for William Ruto, and the undecided is just at 6%. Then finally we close with Nairobi, where we have Raila at 53, William Ruto at 37, George Wajackoyah at 3%, David Mwaure at 1%, and we have an undecided of 6%. So even if all the undecided go to William Ruto, majority would still be voting, I believe, for Raila Odinga. That brings us, I think, to an end of the regional analysis. If we look at the information by gender and age, what do we see? And how do you actually look at this slide? You look at this slide, I think, running downwards, John. Correct me if I'm wrong. So what we see is that if we look at all the female voters, right? All the female voters, slightly more female voters are inclined to Raila at 46 against Ruto's 43. But we also see that more male voters are inclined to Raila. In fact, almost 10% more male voters are inclined to Raila as opposed to Ruto at 41%. So there are distinct differences, but in essence, what we see is that majority of the males and majority of the females, if we just looked at them as individual pots, are supporting Raila more than they're supporting Ruto. If we look at the age groups, let us look at the younger age group and who they're actually oscillating towards. It would surprise you to see that 18 to 26 between Ruto and Raila, not very different. So Raila has 44% of the hold on the younger voter, 18 to 26, and William Ruto has 42%. If we look at the slightly older but youthful voter, 27 to 35 years, then almost 50% of them support Raila and 44% support William Ruto. And then when we look at the older voters, 36 to 45, we see that at 36 to 45 age group, 50% support Raila, 43% support Ruto. 46 to 55, we see 51% supporting Raila, 39% supporting Ruto. And over 55 years of age, which I don't think any of you here are, 55% support Raila and 35% support Ruto. Right, guys, that brings me to the end of the very brief presentation, and that is the overall statistic, which is 49, 42, and 6% undecided. The other two candidates, 2% for George Wajackoyah and David Mwaure at 0.3. It doesn't take anybody who doesn't understand math or statistics to call it as a two-horse race. That's what it is. Okay? I'm happy to answer your questions. And I think because you may want to get some insights from the analysts, we'll ask them to each just come and give their comments. Is that okay? Do we prefer that? Because I know you can go and burn your stories. Asante sana. Okay. So I think we can start off with Prof. Can you start off by giving your insights, perhaps, on, and I think this will not work because I believe they want the mics active. Yeah. Prof was my American history professor when I was in the University of Nairobi. So with all much respect, Professor.
Thank you very much. It is good to see students doing well. And the presentation is very good, but it points out some things. There is a trend going on.